Well, so much for a gag order, right? Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. We're going to go over the Airmail article now. I haven't read the entire thing all the way down. I've read about 75% of it, and I'm definitely seeing the reason why people are like freaking out. Okay, so right off the bat, I noticed that it goes into a whole lot of detail about Olivia from Chronicles of Olivia. I don't know if she has more to do with this personal investigation that the family did than we are assuming. Because from what we're understanding, Kaylee was following Olivia online, which is the reason why the family reached out to Olivia to tell their story through the voice of someone that their daughter followed online in the true crime community. And that was actually really kind of like a cool thing to see. It really was. That's kind of like what we're here for, to be able to actually physically, personally help a family tell their story. So to see that, knowing that Kaylee was a fan of Olivia, that was actually really cool to see. It really just was. And there's really no other way to describe it. It was cool to see. It just was. But Howard Bloom goes on and on and on and on and on about Olivia in this article, back and forth quite a bit. So I don't know if they're trying to allude to the fact that she maybe actually was this PI that the family actually enlisted, or what. They're not being mentioned like they're the same person, but Olivia herself is being mentioned a lot as having a very personal and important and sentimental connection to the family, while also being this like true crime investigator with a background in investigation that like runs in her veins because of who her father was. It's just interesting to me how in depth they got into like Olivia's story when this isn't about her. This is about the Idaho 4 victims themselves and the actual families. There's just a lot of context in here about Olivia for some reason. Now, some of the things that I caught in here was like, okay, we had heard from Christy when she spoke with Daniel that they didn't physically have Kaylee's phone. But then this paragraph right here, Steve had discovered this connection talking about Kaylee following Chronicles of Olivia. Steve had discovered this connection when he and his oldest daughter, Olivia, were going through Kaylee's phone for clues. Did you guys have the phone or did you not have the phone? Because I've always been super curious on as to if the phones were actually at the crime scene. That's just a question that I've always wondered. And then whenever we heard that from Daniel, with Christy claiming, no, we don't have her physical phone. This is the phone records and stuff that we were going through. But them not having her physical phone, I don't know. I don't know what's on a personal phone itself that can't be mirrored. I don't know what context is missing there. But I wish that we kind of had some clarity on that, because even just the families having the victims' phones themselves physically has been a back and forth contradictorial conversation for no reason. Now, it's also interesting in here that it alludes to the fact that Steve is the one who told the police about all of the back-to-back phone calls that night with Jack's phone, Jack DeCore's phone, because it says it right here. Steve quickly passed that intelligence too on to the cops. And it goes on to talk about how they had Jack like disrobe and take photos of his body and all these things. And it wasn't until they took all those photos and he saw that he had no injuries on him whatsoever that Steve pretty much like let go of Jack being a suspect. Because up until then, it seems like the way this article is going, that Steve was not convinced whatsoever that Jack didn't have anything to do with it. But it looks like after all of the pictures were taken and Jack did everything that he was like basically asked to do to call himself out, take himself out of the equation, that's whenever Steve was like, okay. Also, we need to remember that whenever Christy talked with Daniel, she's the one who told him that the girls had to contact Hunter Johnson to come over and open Xana's door, and that's where Ethan's body was discovered, like up against the door, which was making it difficult for the door to be opened. Well, that's being reiterated here. It's being reiterated that Steve tracked down Hunter Johnson. It says it right here. Chapin's frat brother and best friend. Just before noon on November 13th, Johnson had been summoned by the two distraught survivors to the King Roadhouse, where he had discovered Ethan's body. Days later, he gave his eyewitness account to Steve. So Hunter Johnson himself spoke that story to Kaylee's father, is how this reads. And another thing I will say going through this, they definitely make it seem as if it's not just Bryan. There is lots of plural verbiage in this entire article. Now, you guys, this article literally gives confirmation to the fact that Steve Goncalves did in fact have something to do with some of the Linda Lane leak. I don't know if it was all of it or just some of it, but the way that this is written, and it seems as if Howard Blum is in contacts with the family and with people that talk to the family and is getting information from them. This makes it seem, definitely, as if Steve was responsible for portions of what was going on with Linda Lane. Now, it's mentioned towards the end of this little area where they talk about the different things that Steve was getting in lieu of tips and information. So it talks right here that there was a jailhouse snitch. So that means that somebody in jail, and I know that this is probably going to end up bringing up Emma Bailey and Demetrius Robinson. A lot of people are going to start talking about that. I already know. Probably is happening already. But there was a jailhouse snitch that apparently had information on the case, and both Steve and the PI fanned out into several states, which is kind of odd to me, unless the people involved in this have moved away, which obviously would make sense if they were no longer in the area, right? But if this is somebody in jail, it's got to be a local person to the jail that they're in, because this isn't prison, this is jail. So the fact that they went to several states, it also makes me wonder if a lot of this has anything to do with Bethany, because we know that she's in Nevada. Well, there was pictures of her taken, I think, last in California, but I know that they were supposed to go to Nevada to talk to her. I just said that state two different ways. See, y'all can't tell me nothing about how I say Moscow or Moscow, because I just said Nevada and Nevada in 30 seconds. So that's just me. But this jailhouse snitch basically was claiming that they had a story that could tie up all of the loose ends, but it turned out to be nothing but a con game to get money. So I'm really, really curious as to who this was that did this and what money was spent on what in order for them to claim that this was just a malicious scheme to squeeze out some money. Was somebody in jail calling the family and being like, yo, this is what it is, put some money on my books? I need elaboration on that, because that's insane. It says, yet Steve persevered only to be conned again. A grainy light bulb video of the King Road neighborhood came his way that proved that Kohberger wasn't the only unaliver, okay, not the only person involved. Then it states that Steve must have paid a lot of money and hired a professional videographer to examine the recording of the video, that he then found out that it was fake. And then it goes again to, then there was, look at this word, his decision to leak a timestamp video of another vehicle tearing away from a street adjacent to the King Roadhouse just before dawn on the morning of the murders. Just before dawn. What time is the sunrise? Okay, so according to this, sunrise this morning was at 6:55 a.m. It's October. I don't remember when time changes, okay? So we can give or take an hour, okay? Regardless, sunrise is not at 4:55 a.m. So if this is video of a vehicle that he was suspicious of that was leaving right before sunrise, that still would have been like a good amount of time after the timeline that we're giving, that we've been given for this. Now, a lot of people are questioning if the timeline has been moved because, like, the 3 a.m. ish hour makes a whole lot more sense than the 4 a.m. ish hour. But regardless, if this was video of a vehicle leaving right before sunrise, then that's still a decent chunk of time after either one of those times, whichever one you want to go with. It's still a decent amount of time after the fact. Then it goes on to state that in Steve's logic, it was very possible that this was game-changing evidence and that it needed real scrutiny, which is something that we were kind of told whenever all of this stuff was leaked, that whoever leaked it just really wanted it like torn apart, dissected. Everything that happened to it is basically what the person who dropped it into the public wanted. So that does sound like it was Steve. I mean, it does. I mean, I honestly can't blame the guy if he really feels like the investigation isn't going correctly, like there's more to it. But he's still playing a very dangerous game when it comes to actual justice for not only his daughter, but the other 3 victims and their families as well. I mean, honestly, I'm not against vigilante justice. I'm just not. Sorry, not sorry about it. Sometimes it's just necessary. Okay? But whenever you're not the only family involved in this, you kind of can't just go full Rambo. Okay? You really can't do that. Not whenever you're not the only family who's lost a child in this situation, because you're putting all of the justice at stake, not just justice for your own child. Now, this just says that this video was also deemed fake, but this is not in the same context as the previous one. So in the one where it says that it proves that Kohberger wasn't the only person, it claims that it was deemed to be fake because Steve paid money to a professional videographer who examined it and found that it was fake. It doesn't claim the same thing for this one. It claims that it was put out on the internet because it was leaked and it was also deemed fake. But now that makes me question like everything, because if it really was Steve's video, I'm really wondering if all of the stuff that we had originally heard in the conversations with Sleuthy Goosey and the Claire person and whoever was claiming to have gotten the footage, which was this Claire person. Man, there's so much to that now that my brain is just going back and thinking of. I'm not trying to dig any of that back up. It is done and over with. But it's just so interesting to me that this article is putting responsibility on Steve. Wow. Okay. Now, this is something I've been screaming about from day one, is the talks reports. I wanted talks. I wanted to know if there was a possibility that someone could have come in and like jabbed them with something to knock them out, or had put something like in their noses and stuff to knock them out. I have been screaming for toxicology, not only for that, but because their blood alcohol levels would give us a really, really good idea about how just out of it they were. Because to me, it had been, like over 2 hours. Over 2 hours since they had been home. We saw the girls eating a very carb loaded pasta dish. Then we see, that there's DoorDash being delivered. That's like the stomach having something put into it to kind of counteract the alcohol. Okay. Well, this article is basically claiming that the reason why Steve doesn't want to entertain any of the rumors that something was flushed down the toilet or there's some sort of like ring involved and that's why they all, lost their lives over this one same thing, is because apparently he was told that all 4 victims had nothing in their system, according to the toxicology reports, when it comes to, yeah, that word that YouTube will be stupid about me talking about. Nothing was in their system. Now, it doesn't claim that Steve saw these tox reports. It just claims that the authorities told Steve that the tox reports showed there was nothing like that in their system. And this sentence is interesting because it says there are some crazy people who are really crazy who were trying to elbow their way into the case with deliberate misinformation. Now, there's been quite a few people who have tried to put themselves into this case, acting as if they had stories that were relevant and tried to get attention put on them, making it seem like they were the star of the show. And yes, there's been more than one. Now, this is where the information gets really interesting about the type of people that Steve actually has in his corner. Because it talks about that he not only has an FBI agent out of St. Louis who is talking to him through personal emails that his field office doesn't find out. Well, they're going to find out now because this article, that FBI agent probably at this point has lost their job, just saying. But he also talks about how there's a handful of sympathetic law enforcement officers, and Steve has also been talking to not just one, but two of the grand jury people that were in that secret grand jury. Not just one, but two. That's huge. Now, this is where I'm kind of getting thrown because we do know for a fact from the paperwork, okay, that whenever Ann Taylor's team showed up to Bryan Kohberger's apartment, when they met up with Don Daniels at Bryan Kohberger's apartment, two things happened of note. Not only did Don Daniels end up handing over the blood samples that were taken that she mishandled for 10 days and didn't have attached to any of the evidence files, okay? She couldn't make that little 10-minute drive and fix that situation. She literally waited until Ann Taylor came out there 10 days after they did the apartment search and then gave the information to Ann Taylor. Well, on top of that, they also walked into Bryan Kohberger's apartment and grabbed a receipt from the bathroom cabinet. I think it was under the sink, bathroom cabinet. That was in that 180-page drop that we got months and months ago, where we got all of the information about Pullman, Don Daniels, all of the inventory reports for the car and for his apartment and office and all the things, okay? That page drop. That one. Now, this is claiming that it was a dark blue Dickies long-sleeved work uniform that he had bought at the Pullman Walmart. Okay, well, I just so happen to have the Pullman Supercenter pulled up right here. And I typed in dark blue. Actually, I didn't type in nothing. I took dark blue Dickies long-sleeve work uniform and I pasted it into here. Now, I did it priced low to high because it will put all of the categories together that are the same price at some point for the $49.99 mark, okay? Now, I know prices fluctuate and whatnot, but these right here are pretty much it. It would have had to have been long sleeve, okay? Now, this one says that it's not even available there, that it has to be shipped. This is a really, thick shirt. You can see just how thick the material is. This looks like one of the types of shirts that my ex-husband would have worn in the oil field. Like, legit. Now, the only other ones close enough to that are these two. And they look like to be pretty much the exact same thing. This is a Dickies men's and big men's original fit twill work shirt. And this is the men's flex long sleeve twill shirt. So yeah, they're pretty much the exact same thing. But these would have been around that price. This would have been around that price. And see, it's long sleeve. But I don't understand how they're thinking that wearing that type of shirt is the reason why he was able to get out of the crime scene without a scratch and without leaving incriminating, red stuff everywhere. Okay. Yeah. How? How is wearing just a regular ass long sleeve shirt going to stop you from having bruises and scratches on your hands and your neck and other places? Because if this is literally what he bought from Walmart, you're not going to get coverage that can stop you, from getting hurt from Walmart, obviously, because this is the only options that they have. Ethan was a big dude, and if him and Bryan Kohberger were scrapping it out, how would that kind of shirt, stop you from getting injured? a punch to the ribs, a punch to the face. I just don't understand how this like regular ass work shirt would have done the job. They state right here that they think that he wore it during the event and then took it off before he got behind the wheel of his vehicle. And then also they assume that it's possible that he stuffed it into a plastic bag and put it in his trunk. See, that alludes to this rumor that we heard right after the defense team's PI, what is his name, Robert Butanti, came out and claimed that Bethany had like actual exculpatory evidence. Okay. Right after that, there was a rumor going around that Bethany saw a naked man running from the house. So if they're trying to claim that he disrobed and ran away to his car, yeah, could have been a naked man that she saw. It very well could have. But it does kind of go back to what Watts the Obsession is claiming, that the frat guys heard in the rumor mill about what Bethany saw out of her window, because in the statements being made in that, the man's not naked. He's like walking slowly, like walking a normal pace across that little parking area across her window. And nothing in what the frats were told that she is now relaying are claiming naked. So I don't know. Could go either way, I guess. It really could. So you guys remember a while back I mentioned that after I was off of Alive with a certain creator, I was given sort of some background information or background details about what could have possibly been on the two girls' phones. Because I've always made a huge deal about the fact that in the PCA they don't stop the timing of the situation with the white Hyundai Elantra leaving at 4:20. They put the end time at 4:25, which is 5 minutes after the vehicle is leaving, and they're basing that off of forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones. I was told what the context of that conversation was, and that person has still not come out and stated this themselves on their channel. So until that actually happens, I will not release that detail here, especially because I don't know if it's actually true or not. I know that this person has talked to the family, and most of the people in the comments, whenever I talked about this previously, guessed exactly who it was that told me this. I'm not going to speak it. You guys that are watching this case have probably already figured it out by the time I was done, even speaking the sentence that I'm currently speaking right now. Well, that's basically coming all full circle now in this article. It states right here, even more troubling was what Steve had learned from people who had spoken to members of the grand jury who had been presented with the prosecution's case. It centered on the alleged behavior of the two roommates who had miraculously survived the night unscathed. Why is the prosecution, because remember, during a grand jury, nothing about the defense happens. They're not even allowed in there. Okay, it's literally just the prosecution story. Why is the prosecution presenting so much sketchy information about the two girls to the grand jury? If this is true, is that not what it sounds like? He literally just stated it centered on the alleged behavior of the two roommates. This is what was presented at the grand jury by the prosecution. Why? Maybe we're not so crazy to have been asking all these questions after all. And then it states that Steve has been told that the two survivors allegedly had not only been awake while everything was taking place, but that they had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources alleged that the two girls had been texting one another as everything was taking place from room to room. Meaning they were texting each other during a timestamp where they knew things were going on between Maddie and Kaylee and the assailant, and they were also texting each other some freaking more while Ethan and Xana were being attacked after the fact. So they were texting each other during both scenarios, yet not a single 911 call? Sketch. I'm going to read it the way it's written. His grand jury sources alleged that the two girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from one room to the next. Yeah. And it seems like we are not alone in wondering how all of this could have happened and no 911 call, because Steve was floored by this. He doesn't understand this either. I wouldn't understand it either. I don't understand it, and it has nothing to do with my child. I can't even imagine the thoughts that actually are going through Steve and Christy's minds, knowing all of this information. I think that the PCA is honestly whenever the family, Kaylee's family for sure, lost confidence in this investigation. Because they were told the entire time, and it's mentioned in this article, okay? They were told the entire time the same thing that we were told, that they didn't hear anything at all. The PCA alludes to that not being true. It does not show that they were asleep, that they didn't hear anything, that they were just super lucky. No, none of the things. The PCA came out and let the world know these girls knew what was going on. They heard what was going on. One of them was coherent and awake enough to get up out of her bed and open her door several times. They knew, they heard there's no way and there's no reason for that 8-hour gap in calling 911. I think that's whenever he lost confidence and started going rogue, because he was convinced basically at that point, according to this, that there was some sort of protected informant. And after a while, and after some digging, he thought he had that informant down. I'm going to just go ahead and read this because I've been told about this scenario, and I have some strong opinions about this. So I want to read this verbatim, and then I'm gonna run my mouth. After some digging, he grew convinced he had the informant in his sights. He was preparing to reach out to this individual to get right in his face and confront him. So whoever this is, it's a male. And we also need to keep in mind that there are still 3 unidentified male DNAs that were found in places important enough to be being mentioned in the court documents. And I'm going to leave it there. But before he could make his move, before he could get in a room and have a heart-to-heart talk with the witness, he was unexpectedly stopped in his tracks by the FBI. The Bureau had sent an official letter to Steve's attorney in Moscow, Shannon Gray, warning that if there were any attempt to contact the individual Steve had been pursuing, there would be legal consequences. The witness had originally reached out to the authorities through a tip line that promised to protect the identities of anyone volunteering information, and the Bureau was duty-bound to honor that commitment. And then the letter went on to make clear, with an intimidating force, the fact that Steve was the father of one of the victims gave him no dispensation from the legal consequences that accompany tampering with a government witness. So not only is there a male, but there must have been something correct in what Steve was assuming when it came to what this man, this guy, knew, because the FBI, the feds, felt the need to step in and tell Steve, whoa, hoss, no go. You will go to jail and not collect $200. Back the F up. That's suspicious as hell. And this is my biggest thing with this. This is my strong opinion on this, okay? There's a guy that has information that the feds are now protecting and stopping from being asked questions. The only reason why Steve would continuously still be doing all of this vigilantism and going rogue and going off script and doing all of the things that he knows he's not supposed to be doing is because he's even seeing the way that most of us here are seeing that something is not adding up. It's just not. Now, I'm not against the fact that Bryan Kohberger could be one of many, because we could literally just be misinterpreting what we're being told about him, because all that we know is what we're being allowed to know. Just because he seems like a lone wolf and blah, 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 don't mean he is. Okay? It just doesn't. And people that are sadistic do stick together, even though it is in small groups. They do find each other and stick to each other like freaking magnets, all right? Steve would really, really, really only be wanting to reach out to this person, this guy, if he really felt as if there was something this person knew that was being protected from the investigation. Not for the investigation, protected from the investigation. Because if Steve really felt as if this investigation was going the way that it was supposed to, that they had all their ducks in a row, that they were doing this investigation correctly, he would not feel the need to do all of this. He wouldn't be, just sitting around doing nothing, but he wouldn't be doing all of this extreme stuff. He wouldn't. And for the feds to step in and just be like, nope, you're not talking to him. What do you guys think about that? That's crazy to me. This is clarifying and validating. There is someone out there, a male someone out there, that is being protected that must have extremely important information. Like hella extremely important information. But I didn't see a single thing in here about the people that Steve is talking to that were on the grand jury telling him anything about the knife sheath. And I had people in my comments saying, oh, that information came from the grand jury person that Steve's talking to about it being blood on the knife sheath. But no, we just went over it, guys. There's not a single thing in any of the information about the people that Steve has in his pocket helping him. And nothing at all about the knife sheath is even being talked about in this entire article. Everything when it comes to the grand jury information is about how sketchy the two roommates acted. So at this point forward, I'm literally not going to deal with anyone who gives me any sort of shit about having questions for these two. Because if we're going to sit here and be told that two people in the grand jury for indicting Bryan Kohberger, not for indicting Dylan Mortensen or Bethany Funk, but for indicting Bryan Kohberger, that in this grand jury to indict Bryan Kohberger, the prosecution brought forth all of this information on the sketchy behavior of the two roommates. I don't comprehend why that be necessary to indict Bryan Kohberger. Unless, when we're being told there's no connection between him and the victims, it is what it is. There is no connection between Bryan and the victims. But we have yet to be told that there is no connection between Dylan or Bethany and Bryan. They have not mentioned a single thing about that. And it's been a big speculation that one of them possibly knew Bryan. There's also a big speculation that, look, I'm going to tell y'all right now. You cannot tell my almost 17-year-old daughter that these two girls are not involved. You just can't. And it's been a theory that maybe Bryan was called over to help clean up because he knows how to clean up, which is why it was so well cleaned up, which is why there was only touch DNA on a sheath. That's just a theory that my daughter refuses to let go of. And she didn't get that from me because I've never said that before now, have I? But I also wonder how much of this information does the prosecution even know? Like, is all of this coming out in this article going to get Steve in trouble? And if this is continued behavior, even after Bryan Kohberger's arrest, which it seems as if all of this is happening afterwards, obviously, he wouldn't have information from people in the grand jury and have all of this other information coming out after the fact if Bryan's arrest just put him at ease. And he even says in here, if anything, it just gave him more unanswered questions. Well, yeah, it gave all of us more unanswered questions. But yeah, that was a lot of really interesting information. And I mean, the last thing that I want is for Steve to end up getting in trouble for all of the things that he's doing. But as a parent, I mean, it just feels like in his heart of hearts, he knows that something's not right here still to this day. And I mean, isn't that kind of like how almost all of us feel? None of us have been okay with how this investigation has gone. We were already not comprehending what the hell was happening before Bryan Kohberger's arrest, but after they arrested Bryan, it just made it make even less sense. It made it even more confusing. So it turns out that we're not all crazy conspiracy theorists, because the families, not just the families, but the alpha of the family is also on this exact same train of something's wrong here. That's really sad. There's literally no telling what the next twist is going to be in this case. But until then, see y'all.